This is a basic social media app that I set up with Next, where a user can post an image or maybe even a video and send that in a post to the server. And it's going to upload this video file or image file directly to an S3 bucket while storing the rest of the information in a database. And then it can redirect me to the homepage feed where I can scroll through my posts, I can view my posts, and I can even delete my post, which will delete it from the database and the S3 bucket. So I'm going to show you how to set this up where you can store your files in an S3 bucket from a Next application. So this is the finished version of the application, and here's some of the code that actually handles the file upload. But I'm going to go and check out the start version of this and run that. And we can see that there's still a lot of code in here, much less code, because it's basically this app, but it doesn't do anything. If I write anything in here, it doesn't actually post to a server. If I select an image, nothing really happens here. So we're going to focus on building out the parts of this app that actually upload files to S3 and then interact with S3 in the database. If we look at the form, we can find the input where the user actually selects the file. And we need to keep track of this in state, which is slightly different than the way we manage state for the text input. So the first thing I need to do is still create a state variable. So file, actually want null to be undefined. And then when the user actually selects an image, the onChange will get called. And I'm going to make a different function for this. So handle change, put this up here. And actually, I'm just going to set this without an if statement. So whatever the file is, the user selects, maybe they select nothing, maybe they select a file, we're going to set that to be this actual file object up here. And then when I go to submit this, the handle submit, I should have some content that was created in this text input here and my file. So I'm just going to console log both of those out right now. Content file. So this isn't doing anything. I just want to make sure in my console that I've actually got those bits of information. So I just have whatever I type in there, and I should just see some sort of file object dumped out into the console. So let's see. So I can see that I have a reference to the file and the text there. And the next thing I do before I send this anywhere, I actually want to be able to see the file here. I think that's just a nice feature to have. It's definitely optional, but I still think it's nice. So I'm going to create another state variable here. And when the user selects a file, there is a URL that we can associate with it locally just in the browser. And actually, I'm going to bring this out into its own object here. So const file equals. So we'll set the file to be the file object. If there's a file, we can generate a URL, just a local URL, and then use that URL to present it in a image tag or a video tag, depending on what type of file it is. So if there's a file that, else, need to set the file URL. If there's no file, then we'll set it to be undefined. And if there was a file URL already created, yeah, we should revoke the object. So a little bit of code, but that will essentially give us a local URL to the file so we can present it in the browser. And then here I have a comment where I actually want to present this. So if there's a file URL and we actually have a reference to the file, then let's see what it does for us here. That might be too much. I'm going to change this to an image tag. But let's see what that does without making any changes. So if I put an image in there, Copilot even put a remove button in there. So how does that even work? Where is the remove button? Okay. On click, set for, oh, that's kind of cool. All right. So it's actually giving us, that's nice. Okay. And if I put a video in there, that should also work. Oh, and also, okay. The styling's not great, but that's pretty good for Copilot. Okay, brilliant. So now I can select a file and I can add a little caption here. And now I need to figure out how to send this file off to an S3 bucket. But before I can do that, I actually need to go into AWS and create that S3 bucket. So if you already have an AWS account, you can log right in and do this. If not, just go create an account and then log in and follow along. But essentially, I'm going to navigate to the S3 console and create a brand new bucket for this application. So I'll create a new bucket. I'll call this threads clone local Sam. It needs to be a unique name, a globally unique name. I hope that's globally unique. And then select a region, probably the one closest to you and your users. I'm going to go with Canada because I'm in Canada. And actually, immediately, I'm just going to throw this into my environment variables because we're going to need it later anyway. So I'll just call this AWS bucket name. There we go. And then let's scroll down. We're going to leave these default settings. We want to uncheck block all public access. And we want to check that I acknowledge that the current settings might result in the bucket and the objects within becoming public. Because the way we're going to set this up from the Next app is that the client is going to be able to upload directly to the S3 bucket, because we don't want large files like a 10 megabyte video file going through our Next.js serverless functions or our edge functions. So it's going to go straight to the bucket. And then when we get these images or videos or whatever file you're uploading, you want to be able to access them straight from the bucket itself. So this is going to be public, and we need to acknowledge that here. So we don't care about versioning or tags. By default, everything's encrypted on the S3 bucket, which is kind of cool. And then we can just create the bucket. And then down at the bottom here, I can see my bucket. So I'm just going to click on that, and I can see that this bucket's empty. And before we can start using this bucket from our Next app, we need to modify some of the permissions. So we go to the permissions tab and go to the bucket policy. Gonna edit this, add a new statement for S3. And this is just going to be for getting objects. We need this policy, get object, because we need to allow pretty much anyone or anything to be able to get an image or a video or whatever file from the S3 bucket. So I'm going to manually type this out. Star right here means anyone or anything can get an object, and the resource is just the bucket we have. So let's see, add a resource. I'm going to say the bucket name is the thing I just copied, and object name is anything. So anything in the bucket will be able to be accessed as long as someone has a link to that object. So save these changes, and I'll add the code like this to the video description so you can just copy and paste it straight in. Then if we scroll down, the other thing we need to modify are the core settings. Since this is going to be accessed from the front end of our application, we just need to enable that. So I'm going to edit this. And for this one, I'm just going to paste it in. So we have put and get as the methods. Put is for uploading a file. Get is for getting the file. The origin, I'm going to change this to be localhost 3000. And basically this applies to this individual bucket. And I've called this bucket local because it is the bucket I'm going to use when I'm testing on my local machine. This means that you'll have a separate bucket for your production version of your app, and you'll have to put your production URL into the settings of that separate bucket. But I'm going to save these changes. This is good for my local instance. And now the bucket is created. We don't need to do anything else with it. Just make sure you have access to the name and its location. That's actually another thing I'm going to write down immediately. AWS bucket region. I put mine in CA Central 1. And the next thing we need to do is create credentials to give our application permission to actually access this bucket. So I am going to open up the IAM service here. I'm going to open that up in a new tab. And we need to create a new user. And users in IAM can be real-life users with a username and password, or they can be applications that have an access key and a secret key, kind of like dealing with any other API that has keys. Again, this is my local application, so I'm going to call this threads local user maybe. And then I'm going to click next. And here I want to attach policies directly. And you will hear a lot of people tell you to just use the Amazon S3 full access policy, but that would give your application complete access to create and delete entire buckets or objects within buckets. And you don't really want that. You only want your application to really be able to add things into this specific bucket and then maybe also delete things from that bucket. So we're going to create a custom policy over here. We're going to click that button. And we're going to specify exactly which permissions this user should have. So I'm going to select S3 from the list, and the actions. Let's see if I can filter these correctly. So we want to put an object that's creating a new file in the S3 bucket, and then deleting an object seems good too. And just those two actions we want to allow. So then I'm going to click, let's see, add ARN. and we're going to specify the bucket name, but we're going to allow this to be on anything within that bucket. So any file in the bucket can be created or deleted by our application. And that looks good. I'm just going to check the JSON here. That looks good to me. So then I'm going to click next, policy name. Let's call this threads local bucket policy and create that policy. And now I can close this tab, go back to the other tab, and if I refresh these, I should be able to see my new policy. Yeah, there it is, threads local bucket policy. So I'm going to select that, hit next, and create the user. So I now have this user, threads local user, and I just need to generate the access keys for this. So I am going to go to, let's see, security credentials and create access key. And then I'm going to select application running outside AWS because that is our Next.js application. And we'll get this little warning here, alternative recommended, use IAM roles anywhere instead. And this is telling us that there is a better way of creating credentials to access our bucket. But it would take about another 20 minutes to get this set up. And I'm pretty sure it costs about $400 to have Amazon manage our private certificates through this workflow. So it might be worth something looking into at some point, but right now, this is more than sufficient. So I'm going to treat this more as a warning and click next, because that warning is telling us that we should be careful with our keys. So when I go to create these access keys here, these should always be kept secret. You shouldn't share them with anyone. You shouldn't commit them into Git. You should probably figure out how to rotate them every once in a while. They shouldn't really be stored in environment variables. But since this is an Next app that will probably be deployed to Vercel, we're going to just copy these straight into the environment variable file. Just make sure you don't share them. And remember that you'll need to go through this process again to create different credentials for your production bucket when it actually comes time to deploying this app. So I'm going to put this in as AWS access key. And then we have the secret key, which I'm going to copy and you're going to see, but I'm just going to delete this after anyway, so it's kind of okay. Access key. These are the 4 environment variables that you need: the name, the region, the access key, and the secret access key. And now I'm done with this. I think I'm good. I don't need IAM anymore, but I am going to keep this bucket window open so we can monitor as files are actually being uploaded. Now we want to have the form send this file straight to S3 when we submit it. But we can't just give the client, the browser, complete access to S3, or users would be able to upload whatever they want or delete whatever they want. So instead, we need to have this communicate with our own server. Our server can generate a secure URL that just allows uploading of this individual file. And then this component right here in the handle submit can send that file directly to S3. But first, we need to communicate with our own server. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new actions.ts file, and we're going to make a server action called get signed URL. And this is going to return a URL that the client can use to send the file to S3. So right now, I'm just going to return, I'm going to return a success object that has a URL string. That's just going to be an empty string for now. This is the structure that I want. And because this is a server action, I'm going to put use server up here. And I already have auth implemented in this app using Next.auth. So I'm just going to quickly drop that in to, let's see, from @auth. So essentially what I'm doing right now is making sure that the user is logged in before I even allow them to request a URL so that they can upload a file. And if there isn't, I'm going to send back a failure, not authenticated, sure. But since I'm logged in, I should get back this success object. So now in my client, I should be able to import that server action from actions. And then right here, I'm going to try calling that. So let's say signed URL result equals await get signed URL. And let's just log this out and see what kind of response we get back from the server. So I'll just, submit this again. We got content and we got success, and there's just an empty URL. So the server action is working, and I would just want to be able to grab that URL. So URL equals signed result.success.url. And I'm going to do a quick check here. If signed URL result dot failure, there we go, something went wrong. Maybe it wasn't authorized. Maybe something else happened. I am just going to set my status message to failed, set loading false, and let's console error. There we go, that's good. Actually, I need to make sure that this is not undefined. There we go. All right, so now this works. So if there's an error, handle the error. Otherwise, we have this URL, and then we can use that to put the file to S3. But first, we need to make sure this is an actual signed URL. So this is where we need to start working with the AWS libraries. And the first thing we need to do is install at AWS SDK client S3. And then we also need to install S3 request pre-signer. I think that's what it is. Yeah, it looks good. Then back in the server action, I need to import S3 client from, there we go. And then I need to set this up, which is almost correct, I think. So these need to be the environment variables we have. I named them slightly differently. So put those in. And for the region, I'm going to use an environment variable too. Process. Yeah, there we go. I think I called it bucket region though. Make sure that you spell these correctly because that can be annoying. So we can use this object anytime we need to do something with the S3 bucket. I also need to bring in the put object command because we're going to put a new file into the S3 bucket. Then down here, once I've done my checks, I'm going to create a new put object command. And this needs a couple of different parameters. First is the bucket name, and the second is the key. So that's basically the file name as it appears in S3. So I'm just going to call this test file for now. And those are the only two we need. We can add more things later, and we will, but that's all we need to get set up for now. And then I'm going to bring in the other library. So import get signed URL. And then we're going to create a new signed URL from those objects. And I'm actually going to expire this in 60 seconds. So that means that we're going to create this signed URL. And actually, let's just take a look at what this URL looks like. So we're going to bring this in. I'm going to hit post. And I think I'm not logging this out anymore. Console log URL. So let's go back, do that again. And here's the URL. So this is the signed URL, all of this stuff. Let's actually just grab this and see what it looks like. So you can see, let's word wrap this. This is a really long signed URL. It has the information about the bucket. It has the file name of the file I'm trying to upload and a whole bunch of other stuff that actually gives permission to my app to upload this file. And when I specify that this URL expires in 60 seconds, that means that my client application has 60 seconds to actually upload the file. And that can avoid some malicious uses of this URL. So that all seems to be working. So the only thing left to do is actually use the URL in a fetch request. So let's see, we're going to use that. Method's going to be put, the body's going to be the file, and we're going to specify the content type. And I don't think we need this. Although I am realizing that file might not even be a thing here. So we should probably do another check, I guess, right around here. Make sure that I do actually have a file selected before I go and generate the signed request and do this put request. And I'm going to update my status message that the user sees to be uploading file. So let's see if this works. This part of the code that uses that URL, that signed URL that we generated, should upload that file. So this image should get uploaded to the S3 bucket. So I'm going to check the S3 bucket. It is empty. There are no objects in it. If I hit post here, it should now send it off to S3. But it seems like there was a cause issue. So I may have messed up the permissions. Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I messed this up. This is supposed to be HTTP localhost 3000. Let's save those changes and try again. I'm gonna have to refresh this page because I don't have proper error handling. That is something I should probably add in right now. Let's post this. Seems to be uploading the file. I'm gonna check the network tab. Okay, it's doing that. Oh yeah, okay, so it said created. That's looking good. Yep, the put request 200, okay. And if we go back to the objects, let's refresh, and there is my test file. And actually, if we select this file in S3, we should see the object URL right here. If I open this, I'll be able to see that I can access the image from the bucket. So that's pretty good. This is actually a public URL that I could share with anyone, so anyone can see this file. So that's great. I now have the image uploaded to S3, and I'm able to access the image from S3 too. While I'm thinking about it, though, I am going to implement a small amount of error handling here. I think I'm just going to wrap this whole thing in a try catch. I'm also going to throw here if there's an error. I can remove this loading state, and yeah, I'm going to handle all errors in one go here, which I don't think is a good method, but it should do the job. And I'm going to take the loading state, put it in a finally block. Don't know why it's returning here. Okay. Let's also, yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. That'll at least help me handle errors. So, but this seems to be working. That's great. But we're not doing anything to ensure the user doesn't upload something bad. And what I mean by that is really they can upload whatever file they want right now. They can upload any size of file. And we really want to restrict that to only be images and videos that meet our requirements. So we're going to add a little bit extra logic here. And in the server action, we're going to do a couple of checks. And the first check is actually going to be for the file type. So if we scroll down to the file input, I can see the different files that I'm accepting client-side just in the HTML. I'm going to make sure that the file is definitely just one of these things before even generating the URL. So I'm going to say accepted types. I'll turn this into an array. Let's just separate on the commas. Then we're going to require the client to send in which type it is. So we'll say the type is a string, and then we'll do a quick check. If accepted type includes, if accepted type does not include the type of the file they're trying to upload, it's an invalid type. We can also check for the size. So let's say we have a max file size of 10 megabytes. Is that actually 10 megabytes? I think, yeah, okay. Then we can also have the client pass in the size. Yeah, gonna make that a number, and we can double check that. And then I'm gonna bring this down, obviously, so that only gets signed if those requirements are met. So this by itself is just the client telling the server what the type is and what the size is, and we only generate a URL if those things match what we have. But the client can still lie about those things. So what we're also going to do, I need to bring this part down as well, is we're going to embed that in the signed URL. So whatever the user says these values are, that's the values it has to be when it gets to the S3 bucket. We do this by saying the content type has to be that. The content length is going to be that size. And then we're actually going to have the client pass in a checksum as well, which will make sure that the file arrives at the S3 bucket in the same way that it left the client. And we'll use SHA-256 for this. And this is all stuff that gets embedded in the URL that the client then uses. So this URL is built securely on the server, then sent to the client and used from the client. We can also embed some metadata if we want to in here, which can be handy if we want to be able to associate some data with the image in S3 later on. So I'm going to put in the user ID I have from Next.js, so that if I have code that checks images later on, I will know which user uploaded just based on the file stored in S3. So now I need the client to actually send this data accurately to the server. So when we call this function, let's see, get signed URL, we need type, size, and checksum. So the first two are going to be really easy. The type is the file.type, the size is file.size, and then we need to generate a checksum, which is a SHA-256 checksum. So I have a function already that I'm just going to paste in here that does it using the browser's crypto library. So I can just set this equal to that, and we're going to hash the file, turn that into a string, and send that up to the server. And this just validates that by the time it gets to S3, that nothing bad happened on the way. So let's go. Why is it complaining there? Checksum is a string. I think I need to probably await this. Yep. Okay. So now the signed URL will have all that information in it. And this should still work the same way I want it to. If I post, it should successfully upload that. Yep. But if one of these details was not quite right, let's say that I say the size is off by a byte. If I try and upload this now, S3 won't accept it because, oh, it did. It worked. Oh, no, it didn't. I just don't have good user messages, but I can see here, yeah, there we go. It's 403 forbidden because the size didn't match. So that is a nice way of making sure that we have some control over which files can actually be sent to S3. So if I do this again, it should be working again. It sends it to S3. That's all okay. So I've done this a few times now. And if I open up the S3 bucket again, I can see that there's still only one file. And if I refresh, there is just that one test file. And that's because this object key over here in my actions test file is the unique identifier for the file. So every single time I upload an image or video or whatever to S3, if it has the same name as something that already exists there, it's just going to overwrite it. It's going to update it. So instead, I really need a unique name here every single time I upload a file, because I never want to have a collision between multiple users uploading files. So I need it to be unique, but also when we get the URL for these files, these publicly shareable URLs, you can see that the name is the last thing in the URL. So I need it to be unique, but I also need it to be unguessable, because I don't want people to just be able to come to these URLs and guess what a file name might be. Like if I used IDs or UUIDs, people might actually be able to guess that. So we need to create a random and unguessable name here so that we don't get collisions, but we also have shareable URLs that are still private enough because they're completely unguessable. And for this, we have two options. If we're using a normal function, then we're going to import the node crypto library. If you're using an edge function, you don't have access to this, and it's just a slightly different function. I'll show you in a second. But for the node environment, we can have something like this to generate a 32-byte random string. And this is a function that I'm just going to call here every single time I create a new signed URL. And if this were an edge function, instead of doing these two lines, you would create a function like this. And all of this code works in an edge function. I'm just using a node environment right now, so I'm going to stick with this function. And now if I go to upload this image, let's go back to the app, and I'm going to click post again. I'm going to wait for this to be successful. There we go. If I go back to the bucket, refresh, there's my new image. And if I post again, I should get a brand new image here because it's all based on name. And I did give it two unique names there. And just to verify my code's working, I'm going to upload a video file. I think this video is 8.9 megabytes. So this is still within the threshold that this should work to get uploaded. It just might take a little bit longer as it's a bigger file. So that's created now. And again, I should have another file up here. So all of this uploading is working correctly. And that's great. I have all these files in S3, but I need to associate these with entities in my application. So my app has users and posts in the database, and the posts are these things that I'm creating here. And I want to be able to associate these files in S3 with the user that created them and the post that it belongs to. So I also have this media table here, and every single time I create something in S3, I want to create a new entry in this table that has any data I need about the item. It's going to have the URL, the type, whether it's an image or a video, and then I'm going to be able to use the primary key on this table to link it up to a post, and then I'll be able to view those posts in my application. So As I'm doing all of this in the backend, generating this signed URL, I also want to create entries in my database to keep track of all of this. And there's going to be a couple of different steps here that will all come together at the end, so just bear with me. But first, after creating this signed URL, I'm going to immediately create an entry in my media table. And I'm using Drizzle, so I just have to import all my database stuff, import my media from my media table, and then I should be able to db.insert into my media table. I want to attach the user ID, which I have access to from my session, the type, which is actually going to be either image or video. So I need to say, I guess if type starts with image, then it's image, otherwise it's video. That is going to be good enough for now, but this is one of those lines of code that ends up causing hours of headaches down the road when something changes in the database. So not a good long-term plan, but works fine for now. What else does a media type need? So I need a type, a URL, and a user ID. Okay, type a URL. So the URL here is going to be the signed URL, but it's only the first part of the signed URL. It's everything before the query params. There we go. And why doesn't it like that? Let's see. Expected 1 arguments, but got 2. Oh, right. This is not how Drizzle works. Huh. Let's see. Insert that. Values. There we go. All right. And then I'm also going to get the return value from this. So just the return object from the database, the media object. And let's see, media result. This is always going to return a collection. So I'm just going to make sure I get the first item out of the collection. Okay. So I should now have an item out of this that will have the ID. That's the reason I did this. Actually, I really could just say returning ID media.id. So I just want this to return the primary key of the entry that was put into the media table, because I'm going to send this back to the client. So let's go media ID is media result.id. And I need to await this. Okay, now that's good. All right. So essentially all I'm doing now is creating an entry in one of my tables in the database as I'm generating the signed URL and uploading that image to S3. And this will give me access to that entry on the client too. So I've got the signed URL here. Also, gonna change this so I get the URL and I get the media ID, and then I'm gonna console log this just so we can see that this is all working. Go back to the application. Let's submit this again. The video is still on loop. Gonna go to the console. We're gonna hit post. And there is the ID that was just created. So if I go back to my tables, I should be able to click on media, and there it is. There's the entry that was just created. It has a primary key 1, and here's the URL. And if I open that in the browser, it should show me the video that was uploaded. There's that unique identifier, and I'm now able to access that in my own database, and I have a primary key that I can link to other tables. And now that's working, I want to actually create a post entity because I have this content here, I have the media entry. I now need a post in my database that represents the whole thing. So when all of this has finished, when this is all successful, I now want to create a post. So this is going to be a new server action. I'll just put this down here. Export async function, create post. And this is going to accept 2 things. So it's going to accept the content, that string that I can type in. So I'll call that content, put that as a string. That's not how you do types in TypeScript. Gets that content and the media ID, just 1 for now. Let's see, can it do this for me? Type, create post args, fine, perfect. Okay. So now I want to call this from the client once that's all successful. So we'll await, create post. I need to import this and we'll send content in an object, content media ID. Perfect. Okay. So now the server should have enough information to create a new post entry. And again, I need to do a couple of checks. So the first thing I'm going to do, make sure the user's actually logged in. And I'm getting this media ID passed in from the client, And I want to make sure that first it actually exists in the database, the row was actually created, but also that that row was created by the current user. So I'm just going to do a quick check here. Media item equals db.select from media, not quite where media.id is equal the media ID. I just need to bring in the equals function, and this isn't going to work because media is optional, I think. So again, this is going to be something that I only do if the user is currently uploading an image, because I am going to allow users to upload posts without the image or video or whatever file. So we're going to do this if they actually try to upload a file. And I'm going to do two wheres here. So where it's equal to that, but we'll throw in an and. Need to import that. And this is going to check that the media.userID is actually the user's ID. Because if nothing comes back here, if there is no item in the database with that ID that belongs to this user, then something either went very wrong on our end, or we have some sort of malicious user that's trying to attach someone else's media to their own post. So either way, I'm just going to stop right there, abort. We're just going to say this is a failure case, maybe media not found, console log or console error, some stuff, figure that out later. But yeah, at that point, just not going to continue. However, if we're all good, then actually I need to just await this call. So if that's good, then we need to create the new post. So db.insert into the post table, which I need to import post from, and this is posts. And we're going to make a new entry. So insert into the post table values. I don't remember what is in my post table. Let's see. We're going to need a user ID, content. Okay, that's it. User ID and content. User ID, content, cool. Okay, and this is values. Perfect. And then we're going to get this post item by making sure that this query returns that item and that we only get the first thing out of it. Cool. Okay. So we create that post item, and then I need to update the database because that media item that I have contains a spot for a post ID. So to associate this video or image or whatever it is with my post, I'm going to insert the post ID foreign key in this table entry. So now I need to do an update down here, db.update media. And yeah, it pretty much seems to have that right, except I didn't await this. And again, this update only happens if someone actually tried to submit this with a media ID. And I'm missing that there. Okay, so this should be good now. So when we go to create a post, we pass in the media ID, make sure that actually exists, create the post item. If there's a media ID, associate that with the post item. And we're not actually guaranteeing that the file was uploaded to S3 successfully. We could put another check in here. Maybe we make a request to S3 to double check it's good. Or we could even have the S3 bucket trigger a Lambda function in AWS that then communicates to our database that everything was successful. It's kind of up to you and your use cases of your app. In this case, I'm good with just the client-side application informing the server that everything was successful. So go ahead, create that entry. We are making sure that the media item does exist in the database and does belong to this user. And that's good enough for me. And then at this point, if all of this was successful, I don't want to return anything. I want to send the user back to the home page because that's their feed, and then they should be able to see the new post. So I'm going to import two things up here. I'm going to import redirect from Next navigation. And I'm going to import revalidate path from Next cache. Perfect. Okay. So we'll revalidate the homepage just so Next knows to actually go grab any new data there, and we'll redirect to the homepage. Perfect. Okay. So hopefully this is good now. Let's just look through these steps. So when we try and submit the form, we first try and get a signed URL. Then we send the file to S3 just as long as there was a file in that request. we are going to make the post no matter what. So I think I need to refactor this code a little bit, because whether I have a file or not, I still want to create a post. It's just that if there's a file, I have this media ID. So what I might do here is say that there's a media ID, and its type is going to be string or undefined. No, it's going to be number or undefined. So if we go through all these steps and get down here, I guess what I actually want here is to say that the media ID is equal to that. And then I get to use it outside here. Okay, so try and upload the image. If that's successful, create a new post, and then that should redirect us back to the home page. If there were errors though, we should handle those. And I think this should work. Let's test it out. So I'm gonna go back to the app. I'm gonna just create a new one here with an image. So I'm gonna say, don't use auth and try and post that. Uploading to S3. Once this is done, hopefully it takes us to the home page. And it's created, and it didn't take us back to the home page. So I'm going to see what was actually created here. I have 2 entries in my media. Okay, that makes sense. I have none in my post. That's kind of weird. I might have messed up my code. That's a likely scenario here. So let's see if we're getting any result here. And I'll console log that out, because this is how the error cases are handled. So I really should be checking to see if there's an error there. Let's post again. And failure, media not found. Okay, that's kind of weird. So the media ID, I wonder what that is. Let's check it. Media ID. Let's post that. So the media ID is 5. That's coming out just fine. And when we go up here, that would be an entry in the database. Oh, okay. That was really stupid. I didn't check. All I need to do was check. Okay, so if there is no media item, so const media item equals, the error is only if there isn't an item. Okay, I was not paying attention to what I was actually writing there. Okay, all right, so it was always erroring out. Okay, try it again. Let's see, this should hopefully work. We get that. Okay, finally, and it redirected back to the home page where we should actually see the image appear. I've already set this page up to work, so I must have messed something else. I am not actually awaiting this, so when I go and update the foreign key, it's not happening. All right, let's try that again. One more time. North. All right, uploading. Once this is done. Oof. Oh, no, good. Yay. All right, awesome. So now it's trying to present the image from S3 on the home page. We're getting this error because I haven't actually set this URL up to be accepted by my application. So we go to the next config.js and add this as one of the domains. So this is going to be my threads clone local sam all the way up to .com. Perfect. Okay, so now, let's see. Hopefully this should work. And there we go. The posts are showing up. And I'd already set this page up to work with this schema, and we can take a look at the queries over here. So every time it goes to the home page, it's selecting the posts, user, and media from those tables, and it's just joining those all together to actually get that image. We should even be able to see. Yeah, okay. So when we go to create a new post, let's actually do this. Let's create a little space and see what queries are happening when I go to create that post, kind of review that process. So go in here, let's select an image. Let's select a longer video here. Here's a video. And then we're going to post this and look at the queries that come out. So first, we're inserting into the media table, and we're putting in all of that information. It makes its way up to the S3 bucket. At that point, we then, that happened a lot, select from the media table to grab that item, make sure it exists and belongs to that user. Then we create a new post item. Then we update the media table to link it to that post item. And then we get redirected back to the home page where it selects and joins all of those together. And there, it's all working. And because these are public URLs, I've set it that I can obviously play the video, but if I click on the video or the image here, it will open up the actual URL. So this is now a shareable link if I want to share it, but it's unguessable if I don't want to share it. So now we're going to look at just one more thing, and that's being able to delete these posts, because right now I have these delete buttons, but they don't currently do anything. And when I do delete a post, it is going to delete the post from the database, it's going to delete the media item from the database, but it also needs to head over to S3 and delete the item from S3. So it's a little bit of a process here. So if I go back in here and I'm going to go to my home feed now, I have this action already set up. So it is console logging delete with the post ID. Every single time I hit the delete button, that's already been connected. I can see those deletes happening. So all I really need to do is within this server action, perform all of those things, delete from the database and delete from S3. So the first things are going to be pretty simple. Well, yeah, I guess I do need auth. I need to make sure that the user is currently logged in. And I would also want to make sure that the user owns this post that they're trying to delete. So let's see, can I grab the post from the database? Well, I need to import the database. Actually, I'm just going to go to my other action and steal all of this because I feel like it's all going to be relevant. So, yep. All right, so we grab the post. If there is no post, then something bad happened. They're trying to delete something that doesn't belong to them, or something went wrong on our server, so we're just going to send a failure message. Otherwise, we can delete the post. We can delete the media, perfect, and we need to delete from S3. You might want to do this in a transaction, but I'm just going to leave this as is. So to delete from S3, I'm going to go over here, and the code is going to be kind of similar for a lot of this stuff. So setting up the S3 client is going to be similar. I'm going to copy and paste all this because I want this S3 client. I don't need any of this stuff. I don't need any of this stuff, but I want the S3 client. And we're not going to use a put object command. We're going to use a delete object command. So I have my S3 object. Then down here, we're going to create a new delete object command, which needs the bucket name and the file name, the key there. So this actually is inside of the media table. So as I delete that, I am going to get the media item. Just make sure that's returning, and I only want the first item. There we go. So this should be media item.url, but it's actually just the last part of the URL is the name. So I'm going to split that. Okay, there we go. That looks good. All right. So this is the key that I want to delete. This is the command. And I don't need to generate a signed URL. I don't need the client to perform this task because we're not actually grabbing this large file. We're not going to process the file in any way. We just need to send a message to S3 saying, hey, delete this file. So this is something that we can just execute right here from the server action. So we can call, and actually that looks exactly right. If we look through these steps again, make sure the user is logged in, make sure the post belongs to the user, delete the post, delete the media item, delete the file from the S3 bucket. So now let's see, I don't know which one this will be. Let's just look at the number of objects. So currently in S3, there are 12 objects. And currently in my database, I have 3 posts. So if I go and delete this post and everything goes well, I'm going to check the network tab too. If I hit delete, it should, oh, that failed horribly. Let's see if there's something in the console. It's saying that I'm violating a foreign key constraint. So it might be just that I need to delete my media item before I delete the post. Okay, media item has a foreign key to the post, so delete this, then delete this. Okay, let's see. Don't know why that was so bad. All right, let's hit delete. Localhost, okay, fine. Did the post okay. It didn't actually try deleting from S3. Oh, right, yeah. Because the S3 connection is happening from the server, I'm not going to see this in my network logs here, but everything seems to be fine. I didn't actually call a revalidate here, so I should do that as well. Let's import revalidate path, because once I've deleted I'm going to refresh the homepage. Okay, so that seems to be deleted. I did have 12 objects in here. Now I should have 11. That's great. I did have 3 objects in here. Should now have 2. Perfect. All right, now let's try that again and see if it just works seamlessly. So we hit delete. It goes away here. We should go from 11 to 10 now. Perfect. And in my database, I now have 1 post left. And that's it for this video, but make sure you check the description for any links and code examples. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.